An important part of an innovation trajectory is your own position, your own stance as an innovator. So I would like to introduce to you a new wicked challenge, which is your own transformational journey. And the first question you have to ask yourself is, do you believe in your personal transformation? Do you believe you can, as a person, transform? And if the answer would be no, or you would be here since somebody else has sent you, then probably you should stop here. There are 4 steps in this process. Step 1 is to empathize with yourself. Step 2 is to define, to frame yourself in your new identity. The third one is to ideate your new self using biomimicry principles. And the last step is, in a way, to create your own prototype, which means to make a plan for what can I change and what am I willing to change. These are 4 steps, each going with a number of assignments that we have integrated in your project journey. The purpose of this part is just to introduce you the whole trajectory of your personal transformation journey. Session 1, as said, was to empathize with yourself. And the ultimate aim is to complete something which we call an empathy map, in which you try to empathize as much as possible with yourself, just as much as you will empathize with your clients for your project journey. In this case, you're going to empathize with yourself as an innovator. So you empathize with yourself, you do that on your own, but at the same time, you're going to use 2 short interviews with 2 colleagues. And then, when you've done those 2 steps, we give you a few tables with strengths and values in order to help you to identify easier which strength and or values you would like to develop or in which you are already very strong. And the outcome of this process is a finalized empathy map. In your project plan, we do discuss in lots of detail the empathy map. So you can either look there or just take it from this presentation. The empathy map looks as such. There are 4 quadrants in there, and the purpose is to fill that empathy map with what you say, based on your interviews, based on your strength analysis, based on what you think you're not strong in. The second quadrant is, what do you do based on interviews, based on your strengths, based on what you're not strong in yet. The third quadrant is, what do you think? And the fourth quadrant is, what do you feel? And that, of course, all relates to you as an innovator. So as an innovator, what do you say to people? If you talk about innovation, what are the phrases that you would use? What do you do as an innovator? What kind of innovations do you do? How do you do your innovations? What do you think? While innovating, what do you really think silently in yourself? And last but not least, how do you feel about all that? Now, if you can picture that in an empathy map, you really get close to understanding yourself as an innovator and to be able to improve your stance as an innovator. That is your first assignment, which, as I said, we will repeat in the project assignments. The second assignment is building on that empathy map, and it is using sort of empathy-based stories. And we give you 2 short stories in which you can complete how you feel. The one is the situation in which you're not happy. Imagine you're working in a team that aims to create something, and something happens which makes you not really happy, right? How does it come? What is it that triggers you? And be reasonably critical with yourself. The second story is, you're not happy. That means you are an innovation project, something happens, and you're extremely unhappy with the situation, with yourself, with somebody else, with how the project works. Same story, imagine that, and see, can you identify your type of behavior, your strengths, your weaknesses, what is it, what triggers you. It's quite important to get as realistic as possible to why you feel unhappy at that moment. And then, in order to facilitate a little bit the exercise, we want to give you a few tables of predefined strengths and values. Not that these are the only strengths available, not that these are the only values available, but I hope it helps you to really identify easy what in your case would be your strengths, which is the first table. The second table is what is not yet your strength, but you might feel it as something important that you would like to develop. And the last one is what are for you core values. And we hope that these three tables help you in finalizing your assignment. The second session in your personal transformation journey deals with redefining yourself, defining yourself. And the aim is to come up with an influence diagram, which tries to describe your context, not only yourself, but how do you relate to other people, and in your relationship with those other people, are you more a decision-driven person, or are you more a community person, or whatever you think is most adequate to describe yourself. You do base your analysis on your empathy map, of course. You've done the exercise to create the empathy map for yourself. You start from that empathy map, and you're going to use an approach that you're going to find in the presentation. We use a tool in order to facilitate to make your influence diagram. You do not need to use this particular tool. This is just to help you if you feel more comfortable to draw your own influence diagram as you would wish to. Be free to do so. An influence diagram with the tool that we suggest you has 4 categories of items. The one is decisions. And a decision is what decisions do you take, do you like to take, how do you like to strategize your decisions, etc. Second element in your influence diagram are the uncertainties. See, what is around you, what makes you feel uncertain? The third item is values. What are values? We already touched on that in the first session, but it comes back in your influence diagram. How do those values influence your connection with the others and your functioning in a team? Then you have a function. And a function is not much more than a variable. Something, an amount of work, for instance, that needs to be done. And the last one is determinism, right? Which refers in a way to a state of, for instance, a state of happiness, a state of satisfaction, something that you feel or you would like to move towards. Now, what we advise you to do is to start with very small parts of your behavior, as this example shows you. This is a very tiny influence diagram about a particular subset of your behavior. But it's easier to start with small subsets and then, as you see in this drawing, then to bring them all together in a complicated, hopefully complete influence diagram of yourself. That is going to help you to frame, to define what you would like to do in the rest of your personal transformation journey. And then you finish this session, and that again is an assignment that you will find in your project transformation journey, with a description of at least one intention, hopefully a few more intentions that you have in order to innovate yourself, to improve yourself in your being that innovator. The third session, which you will find in the 4th assignment of your project journey is now that you have defined what you would like to change, what you would like to work on. Does this go far enough? Can't you be slightly more creative? And that is what we call in design thinking, as we will explain in the project plan. In design thinking, you call that ideation. To try and make the profile you have, to try and make the definition that you have of yourself, in this case, more creative. There are very many ways to do that ideation, and in your resources you will find the Delft Design Guide, which contains roughly 120 possible ideation techniques. We invite you to use one, and we invite you to use particularly biomimicry. And biomimicry is nothing more than the lessons that we can learn from how nature has survived and evolved over the 3.8 billion years that it exists. One, the reason to use biomimicry is since nature is doing very well. But secondly, if we try to draw lessons from what nature has to learn us, we will be more sustainable, more in line with natural behavior than what we might be without comparing that to what nature teaches us. So, we are going to go through the 6 rules, the 6 principles of life of biomimicry. And the question is, consider those 6 rules and see whether any of those rules give you the idea to change something in your influence diagram. Maybe you forgot something. Maybe you want to change it. So the purpose is, can that biomimicry brainstorm that you do with yourself, can that enrich the idea that you have for the rest of your personal transformation trajectory? Now, as I already mentioned, biomimicry tries to find or tries to compare biological solutions, tries to see how nature would solve issues, how nature behaves in teams, etc. So the question is, if we would look profoundly into what nature does, maybe we can improve also our own human interaction and improve what we do in our teams. Once we understand enough those principles, then we could indeed try to find more nature-related solutions. And then you get this drawing of biomimicry 3.8, as we call it, 3.8 referring to the 3.8 billion years that nature is now learning from itself. You see here the 6 lessons, the 6 principles of nature. And we can start in the top one. Nature is extremely strong in adapting to changing conditions. It tries to incorporate diversity. It embodies resilience. Now, going back to your framing, how much are you adaptive to changing conditions? How much do you incorporate diversity in your team, in your thinking? And do you have strong enough resilience to continue to pick up if anything goes wrong? And that's the way how you're going to use those 6 principles. The second principle is to be locally attuned and responsive. The third one is to use life-friendly chemistry. That's maybe less adaptable to your own personal frame. Be resource efficient, right? Use material and use your energy in particular. Use that efficiently. Integrate development with growth. It's not just about the growth, but it is the development. And you might want to use growth in order to support that development, but the focus is development. And then nature evolves to survive. Can you trace your own track of evolvement? Once you apply those 6 life principles of biomimicry to the framing that you have done, you might be able to enrich that framing, that influence diagram, with the ideas you got from these 6 principles. So, step 1 is you are going, if necessary, but I guess it will have enriched you, you are going to reframe your intentions, and you're going to translate into your transformational journeys what those intentions give. You visualize, so you change your drawing. You visualize how those renewed intentions that you found are going to change your influence diagram, are changing your influence diagram. So you update your influence diagram with the new intentions that you have found based on the brainstorm, the ideation, based on biomimicry principles. Session 4, which leads to the 5th assignment in your project plan, is in a way the prototyping phase of design thinking. What can you change? So it is making your frame about what am I going to do in the next 5 to 6 months? What am I really actively going to work on? It's not enough to make a plan, but how are you going to action that plan? And first step is to use what we call, and I'll explain that in a second, SMART actions in order to define for yourself what you do. And then it is good afterwards to meet with 1 or 2 of your colleague students to see and to discuss what your plan looks like, but how it can improve the progress that you anticipate to make. Now, SMART actions, S-M-A-R-T, each letter standing for something, is a way to be very, very detailed and very concrete in what you are going to do. And the SMART, the S stands for specific. Be as specific in your goals as possible. Try to avoid ambiguity. Be clear in what you are going to do. Secondly, the M relates to measurable. It is easier to realize an action if you can measure somewhere an outcome. How vague that might be, but the more detailed, again, the more concrete, the more measurable you can define your actions, the higher the chance that you're going to reach them. Thirdly, the A, is your intentions should be action-based. What are you going to do? Not what would I like to reach, but what am I going to do? Action-based. Fourthly, the R, be realistic. Don't try to commit yourself to things that you know you're unable to do since you can't do them or they are undoable in general. But it might well be that they're doable for other people, but not necessarily for you. So be realistic in your goals and time anchor them. That means put a timeline on them. Be specific in by when you would have done what. And that are SMART objectives. So you start by identifying a number of SMART objectives, very detailed, very time related. And at the end, be very critical about your time management. Often it goes wrong since you underestimate the time that you need in order to realize some of those activities. So, a few tips: set realistic goals. One of the big pitfalls in those SMART approaches. Make gradual changes and build on your successes. Don't change too big from a first step, but really do that on a step-by-step basis. And do not let minor setbacks stop you. You are going to get minor setbacks. That is where resilience hits in. So you begin again tomorrow. Now, once you've done that, use your classmates, right? Meet with your classmates, discuss your personal transformation journey plan, see how realistic it is, see whether you can't improve it, right? And use your classmates as a mirror, right? To ask you the right, maybe challenging questions. And this is the roadmap of your personal transformation journey. Now, you're going to see those 5 assignments in the assignments of the action plan, which is the way how you're going to realize both your personal transformation journey and your project transformation journey.